everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It's not getting any better. It's just getting worse. Now we have toddler camps. Yeah, they call them tender age camps for toddlers, 3 months old, ripped from the mothers. We really need Congress to pass a bill so that we won't take babies away from their mommies? Really, Donald Trump? What do you think we are? Who are you? And what moral compass do you have at all? Hello, everybody. It is hard to deal with this issue because it is so outrageous. It is so evil. It is so wrong. It is so immoral. But that's where Donald Trump has left us. That's where he put us. And Republicans in Congress, of course, will do nothing about it. The damn cowards. It's good to see you today so we can tackle this together. Here we are, the Bill Press Show, live from Washington, D.C. on this Wednesday, June 20. Yeah, Donald Trump goes up to meet with Republicans yesterday. Only Republicans noticed, only in the House, of course, on the Hill. And it was a total waste of time. Even Republican members who came out of it said they didn't know what the president wanted them to do other than, after this meeting, other than give them money for the wall. And that's the whole point. He is using these kids, he is using these toddlers as pawns in his effort to get $25 billion to build his stupid wall so he can tell his base, look, I promised a wall and I delivered, and I don't care what I have to do to get it. Let's talk about it. Let's hear your comments about it on Twitter at BP Show. Great lineup of guests to talk about this today, including two outstanding Democratic members of Congress, Pramila Jayapal from Washington State and Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, and the legendary, iconic civil rights leader Dolores Huerta here in studio with us. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. Could this be bad news for Starbucks? Yesterday, they announced that they are going to close 150 stores operated here in the United States. Now, people will point out that Starbucks actually closes stores every single year, about 50 stores every year, but this, of course, is about 3 times the number that they normally do. According to Bloomberg, they are going to completely overhaul the remaining stores. They have some changes they have to make because the comparable sales, when you look at like previous sales quarters, are not doing as well. It's their worst performance in about 9 years. Now, we know that Howard Schultz recently left Starbucks. They have a new CEO. His name is Kevin Johnson, and he's the one that sort of had to come out and defend this a little bit yesterday. But as you can imagine, shares for Starbucks slid as much as 6.5% in late trading on Tuesday, but it did come back up a little bit. But that's not good news for Starbucks, closing 150 stores. The old joke of having a Starbucks across from a Starbucks might not be the norm anymore.
No. It's funny. There's one in New York that when I go up for CNN like I did yesterday, that I usually jump in because I have about a half an hour to waste.
Yeah.
They totally redid the store.
Really?
They're doing that.
They're doing that.
Yeah.
They're starting to do that more and more.
It's better the way it is.
By the way, if you want to visit Canada, it might not be the Great White North for much longer. Call it the Great Green North. Yesterday, Canada's Upper House of Parliament approved a revised bill that would legalize recreational marijuana. 52-29 was the vote yesterday. That paves the way for a fully legal cannabis market. Within about 8 to 12 weeks, they're going to get this up and running. They would be the first G7 country to have nationwide legal weed. So, look.
Peter, please. It's the G6 now. Okay.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Sorry, the G6. So if you want to go to Colorado, they've got pot tourism out there. Canada is about to enter the same pot tourism market. Good for Canada. Where the hell are we?
I don't know about getting high with a Canadian.
That would be weird. That would be weird.
Follow us on Twitter @BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
Yeah, don't worry about those infants. Don't worry about the little babies. Don't worry about the toddlers. Yeah, we're keeping them in what the Trump administration is calling tender age facilities. Every time you turn around, it's getting worse. It's getting more cruel. It's getting more mean-spirited. It is getting more and more evil. And that's Donald Trump. Hey, hello, everybody. What do you say? On a Wednesday, June 20, we're not exaggerating this. It is really happening. And we're trying to just deal with it and keep on top of it and fight back against it and do anything we can to stir up and continue the outrage so that Donald Trump doesn't get away with this the way he got away with the Dreamers. It is the Bill Press Show, Wednesday, June 20, 2018. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us here. Your outrage comes through as well online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Don't forget our podcast. Podcasts are doing great these days. Our podcast keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So get on board. Tell your friends about it. The whole show up any time of the day. Once the show is over, put it up there. You can catch it on BillPressShow.com or on iTunes or wherever you catch your podcast. And we ask you when you're there, sign up and become a regular member of the podcast so you get all the extra special stuff we put up for our podcast followers. Also joining you, of course, on Free Speech TV, the great Free Speech TV, and on the radio statewide in Indiana through Indiana Talks, and, of course, in the greater Chicago area on the WCPT, the progressive voice of Chicago. So here's where I think this sort of puts it all in perspective, okay? There's so many aspects of this family being separated at the border forcibly by the Trump administration that I think you can sum it up by thinking of it this way. Are we really supposed to believe that we, the United States of America, we Americans, need an act of Congress to stop us from taking babies away from their mommies? Really? Is that who we are? That we don't see how wrong that is? That we would even consider doing that? That we would continue doing that? And that we would insist there's nothing we can do to stop that without an act of Congress? Really? That's what the President of the United States wants us to believe. That very premise to me is so mind-boggling, is so wrong, that I just can't believe there's anybody with a heart who would believe anything else, who would really say, oh, yeah, it's too bad. Oh, geez, yeah, too bad. Oh, yeah. And you hear people say this. You hear the President of the United States say this, Dumbo. Oh, yeah, it's too bad. Can't do this. This is terrible. I hate to see this. I hate to see this. But, God, there's nothing we can do about it unless Congress passes a bill. That is the most half-assed BS kind of thinking that you could possibly have in this country. It is so dumb, and it is also so wrong, and it is so immoral. There are so many aspects of this. I mean, and again, to clear it up, let's come back and get just a couple of facts straight again. Okay, the big question people are asking, and I was up on CNN yesterday in New York, and the whole question still up is this a law or is this a policy? No, this is not the law. There is no law passed by Democrats or Republicans. There is no law that requires separating families, pulling kids from their parents when they cross the border. None. And anybody that tells you that is telling you a big fat lie. What's happening is the result of a policy. Now, Kirstjen Nielsen says it's a law. It's a policy. It's a policy adopted by Attorney General Jeff Sessions 2 months ago in April 2018. this year. Jeff Sessions calls it a policy, zero tolerance policy. Stephen Miller, chief guy on immigration at the White House, calls it a policy. John Kelly, the chief of staff, told CNN months ago, this is a policy change that we're considering. Okay, just to clear the air, that's one fact we got to hang on to. It's a policy, not the law. This is a Trump administration policy alone. And since this policy was adopted in April, there are 2,342 kids who've been taken from their families and are now held in these detention camps or these tender age camps, which we'll get to in a little bit. Second point, that they say that the law requires this. They have no choice. That, again, is wrong. Factually, that is wrong. And it's worth pointing out. This so-called law and a court decision that they're referring to, that it existed under the George W. Bush administration. And at the time, it was suggested by some people, hardliners or whatever, in the immigration community, in the law enforcement community. Boy, the way to fix this, man, is you take these kids away from their parents and everybody's going to scream and they won't cross the border anymore if we do that. And George W. Bush said, no, we're not going to do that. Barack Obama. People made the same offer under Barack Obama. Barack Obama said, no, we're not going to do that. That's not who we are as a country. Then Donald Trump comes along. What does Donald Trump do? Oh, yeah, sounds good to me. And he's got the people around him who want it. I mentioned them. Jeff Sessions, Steve Miller, John Kelly, Kirstjen Nielsen, and Donald Trump, number one, himself. And so Obama and Bush could have done it. They did not do it. So don't believe it when they say this is nothing new. Don't believe it when we say everybody else has done the same thing. No, again, this is Donald Trump, his policy, 100%. That's why this is happening. And the third myth is, which we hear and heard it again yesterday from all these Trumpers, that only Donald Trump can fix it. No way. I mean, I'm sorry, only Congress can fix it. No way, right? No, you don't need an act of Congress to fix this. It was going along all right. This is the, what do they call it? The not the Walmart rule, but the Pottery Barn rule, right? Yeah. You broke it, you fix it. Donald Trump broke it, he can fix it. He can fix it with one phone call. So all it would take, call Jeff Sessions, say, Jeff, this isn't working out. We got to stop this policy. We got to stop this practice. One phone call. Do not need an act of Congress. So those are three myths. And then they keep throwing out these numbers about how bad the situation is at the border. The two things they're using. One is numbers, and the other is the rhetoric, the language. I mean, this is, of course, again, what's new? This is how Donald Trump started his campaign in June of 2015 when he came down the escalator and said everybody crossing the border was a criminal, a racist, a rapist, a murderer, or whatever. He's still using that today. He actually said, remember he called them animals not so long ago, the whole attempt to dehumanize immigrants. Kirstjen Nielsen at the news conference the other day, she called people coming across the border criminals, rapists, drug smugglers, terrorists. The words they're using. Of course, and MS-13 gang members, right? Donald Trump is saying what Democrats want is they want to infest the nation with immigrants. Think about that word, infest. What does that mean? I mean, who infests, right? Vermin infests. Dangerous insects or whatever, infest, right? It's not a word that you use for human beings. The whole effort, again, to dehumanize. It's a whole part of their strategy. It's just kind of red-hot language.
We've made a lot about when Donald Trump announced that he was running for president. He talked about, they're not sending their best and their brightest. They're sending murderers and rapists. And yesterday, I didn't pull a ton of audio from it. I didn't watch the whole thing because it's one of the most infuriating things I've ever seen. But Donald Trump gave this big speech yesterday, and instead of acting like we've got a problem or We're going to fix this issue. He took it as an opportunity to gloat and say, folks, everyone made fun of me and mocked me because I said these words when I announced I was running for president. Looks like I was right. They are sitting there murderers and they're rapists. Right. So just doubling down on it. I mean, there was a time that was the most outrageous thing that Donald Trump could do, but we've blown that out of the water.
Totally. Yeah. And then I get back to the numbers, okay? The numbers that they're throwing around. And I think the media's done a pretty good job, some of them, of trying to expose this. For example, at the news conference on Monday, Kirstjen Nielsen, DHS secretary, said, quote, "In the last 5 months, we have a 314% increase in adults and children arriving at the border fraudulently claiming to be a family unit." Now, that sounds like, oh, my God, 340. It's gone up 341%. We got to do something. We got to rip these kids away from their families. The New York Times points out that there were 46 cases of fraudulent family claims. So this does happen once in a while. There were 46 total cases in the year 2017. And that has gone up. So in the first 5 months of 2018, there were 191 total cases. So, yeah, that's gone up 341%, but 191 cases is hardly a national invasion, which Laura Ingraham called it, by the way, a slow-rolling invasion of the United States. And by the way, so those 191 cases make up 1% of all the people who crossed the border illegally. 1%. So when you say 341% increase, yeah, sounds like a lot. It's not. They're just using these phony numbers again to try to justify a cruel, mean, inhumane, un-American, immoral practice. And it goes on and on. I mentioned Laura Ingraham, right? She called this. She said, "What's the big deal about this? This is like summer camp."
So since more illegal immigrants are rushing the border, more kids are being separated from their parents and temporarily housed in what are essentially summer camps, or as the San Diego Union Tribune described them today, as looking like basically boarding schools.
Oh, boarding schools. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to boarding school, but I have been to summer camp, and I didn't have to sleep in a cage.
I think a tent in the middle of the desert is not what you would think of when you think of summer camp.
No.
And sleeping in a cage.
No.
And not knowing where your parents are, they're not being able to visit you, and you are ripped apart from them. That's summer camp. The way that these Trumpers are backing up behind this. Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager for Donald Trump, on the air yesterday with another guy, and this man made the point about a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome taken away from her parents. And here, listen to Corey Lewandowski in the mocking this in the background.
I read today about a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was taken from her mother and put in a cage. I read about did you say womp to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome being taken from her mother?
Pick anything you want up at the bottom.
Womp. Yeah. These people are so heartless. Yesterday, I was on, again, CNN. I even forget the guy's name who was up, one of the guys that was on this panel. And he said, so this is a Trumper, right? He said, what's the big deal? We separate in custody cases in the United States, or where there are child abuse and social workers come in and take kids away from their parents. We do that all the time in the United States. What's the difference between that and what we're doing down at the border? You can't even deal with people, who would go there.
How do you defend it?
No.
I just don't understand. I don't understand. I understand Donald Trump is a horrible human being, and I know that there are a lot of people who are thrilled with this and want to see immigration, not illegal immigration, but immigration slow to a crawl in this country. I understand that. But to go out and defend this specific policy and to mock the kids
that
are being removed, snatched from their parents, I just don't know how you do that. I can't figure it out.
By the way, I want to say this too. I know a lot of people are jumping on this bandwagon. The answer is not for Kirstjen Nielsen to resign, okay? I mean, I understand. Democrats come out. Yeah, let's make a headline. Kirstjen Nielsen should resign. No! Donald Trump ought to be thrown out of office.
Right.
Let's start there. This is his policy. Jeff Sessions ought to be fired as Attorney General. John Kelly ought to be fired as Chief of Staff. Steve Miller ought to be thrown out of the White House. And Donald Trump should be impeached.
These guys should be in jail. Every person you just mentioned should be in jail.
Yeah, I mean, if Kirstjen Nielsen resigns, you think it's going to change? No. So, I mean, look, I'm not defending her. Yeah, she ought to resign. All I'm saying is she ought to be fired, but that's not going to change things. It's Donald Trump's policy, right? And what worries me about it is this, to me, has such echoes of the Dreamers program. Remember, last September, everything's gone along with the Dreamers. It's been 5 years. 800,000 young people have signed up to it. They're not citizens. There's no path to citizenship. But at least they can live here without the fear that tomorrow they're going to be deported. They can have their jobs, go to school, start their families, serve in the military, which many of them did. And then Donald Trump said, no, I don't like it. I want to. This is the first time he really did this. I can use these kids as a bargaining chip to get my goddamn wall. And so he threw the program, ended the program, threw it to Congress and said, it's going to be dead unless you do something within 6 months, which they didn't do. Then a judge steps in, said it's got to continue. So, in effect, Donald Trump got what he wanted. He ended the Dreamers program. It's just sort of hanging out there in limbo, but he's never had to pay the price for that. And these 800,000 young people are still hanging up there with the threat of deportation. Now he's doing the same thing. There was no problem at the border with these families being separated. It was not happening, not taking place until April when he started this policy. He created this crisis with these families at the border, just like he created the crisis with Dreamers. And I'm afraid with this cowardly, gutless Congress that they'll let him get away with this too. They'll do nothing about it. So that gets us to the latest is they go up to this big meeting, Donald Trump up to this big meeting yesterday, meeting with Republicans on the Hill. And this is going to, Republicans said, don't worry, this is going to resolve the whole thing because our leader is coming up here to straighten it all out. Well, he came up. There are two bills that they're going to vote on, I guess, today. The extreme Tea Party bill, and for moderates, a more Republican moderate bill, which is still not good and not acceptable. And Donald Trump came up and basically didn't tell them which of them if they should vote for, maybe vote for both, maybe not. All he talked about was, I count on you to give me money for my wall. The point being, and it's very clear for Donald Trump, this is not a humanitarian crisis. It's not a crisis about kids. It is just a political gambit to get the money for his wall.
And by the way, the scarier part of that is these Republicans are looking to Donald Trump for guidance on immigration policy.
Yeah. Right.
He's already shown that he is heartless and demonic on this issue. But B, he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand how it works. He's not a details guy.
No, not at all. I mean, and so if for any, by the way, that's true on any subject.
Oh, totally.
I mean, if he went up there to talk about tariffs, he couldn't talk about it.
Totally.
If he were talking about climate change, he couldn't talk about it. He can't, no, because first of all, he's ignorant, and two, he doesn't want to learn, and doesn't take the time to learn because he's Donald Trump. So the idea that he was going to come up there and straighten them all out, no. And there were, still, we have not heard any leading Republican really stand up and say, no, this is it. I followed this president so far. Boom, boom, boom. I cannot go along with this. I am breaking with this administration. Keep waiting for that person. Who it could be. Mitch McConnell? No. Yesterday said, well, we're going to try to pass a bill by the end of the week that's going to fix this one little problem. And Donald Trump said right away, oh, that's stupid. I won't sign that bill. I won't sign. Donald Trump has said he will not sign. So you hear the contrast, the contradiction? First they say, Congress has to do something. Congress has to fix this. We can't fix it. Congress has to fix it. And then when Congress says, Mitch McConnell, okay, well, we'll fix this. Then Donald Trump says, no. You can't just fix this one little thing. You got to give me a bill that includes $25 billion for the wall, which has, of course, nothing to do with separating the families. It just proves, again, what Donald Trump is all about. And I also add one thing that I haven't heard anybody else mention this, but I find really bizarre, is that the White House claim and Donald Trump's claim that there's nothing he can do, that only Congress can fix this. Doesn't it strike you as kind of ironic? This is the president who last week said, hey, I can pardon myself. I can do anything. I'm president of the United States. So on the one hand, he asserts all this executive power, and he signs all these executive orders, and he told the Republican National Convention, I alone can fix it, right? And now he's saying, I'm helpless. My hands are tied. There's nothing I can do. But it is cruel and is heartless, and we used this word yesterday. It is evil. And then we wake up to find out. We saw the picture, it's the front page of the Washington Post, the front page of the New York Times this morning, the picture of these camps, these tents, and these, 10, 12-year-old boys marching from tent to tent. By the way, they're lined up. To me, you look at the pictures of the internment camps for the Japanese in World War II in California. Look at those tent camps set up in the desert in California, and look at these tents, and you tell me the difference. There ain't no difference. No difference.
It's so true.
But by the way, there's one difference. The families were together in the Japanese internment camps.
At least there was that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it really is. If you think about it in those terms, and you look at the photos, and you look at the video, and you hear the audio of the children wailing, looking for their parents, what's the difference? What is the difference?
No. Well, so now, those are bad enough. Now we wake up and we find out, this broke last night, that, they've got special little camps for the toddlers. For the 3-month, 6-month-old, 1-month-old, 2-month, for the toddlers. They have special camps called the tender age shelters. Tender age shelters.
That almost sounds caring.
Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with this? I'll tell you, Rachel Maddow had a hard time dealing with it last night. This is at the end of her show. This news breaks. Rachel can't even end her show. She's so upset about it.
This has just come out from the Associated Press. This is incredible. Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children. Oh, hold on. To at least 3. Can we put up the graphic of this?
And there is no
graphic. Thank you. Do we have it? No. 3 tender age shelters in South Texas. Lawyers and medical providers. I think I'm going to have to hand this off. Yeah. Sorry. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it is time for The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, where he is live in Brownsville, Texas.
3 tender age shelters, soon to be a 4th. And yet, Donald Trump is saying, we Americans can't do anything about this. We need an act of Congress to stop us from separating babies from their mommies and putting them in tender age camps. Really? Joining us next, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin will be along a little bit later. And then the honor of welcoming to the studio a legendary civil rights activist in this country, the great Dolores Huerta. Quick break. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, it's time to talk about the Free Speech Pledge Drive again, the Spring Pledge Drive. A lot of you have stepped up to the plate so far, but too many of you haven't. And now we got some really, really exciting news today. Maybe this will prompt you to finally get on the stick here and make your pledge, your contribution to Free Speech TV. We're announcing here a matching pledge. It's today only. Get this, $20,000. Yeah, whole group of very loyal and very dedicated and very generous Free Speech TV watchers and supporters have banded together. They put up $20,000 as a matching pledge for today only to take advantage of this. And what that means is up to $20,000. Think about it. Every dollar you give, every $5 you give, every $10, every $20, every $100 you give will be doubled for Free Speech TV. So this gets you into the big time. Think about it. Make a $250 contribution. You're a $500 supporter to Free Speech TV. $500, you're a $1,000 supporter to Free Speech TV. Or even if it's only $25, you're a $50 sponsor to Free Speech TV. This is a great opportunity. This is the real motivation for you to make your pledge today. No other day is going to be like this. This is one unique opportunity, so seize the opportunity. Make your contribution today to Free Speech TV. We always tell you, no gift is too small, no gift is too big. Depends on what you can do. We know you all love Free Speech TV to the extent that you're able to help as generously as you can. And every dollar you give, doubled on this day only, Wednesday, June 20. The way to make that pledge, of course, is to go to the phones here, and I know I've got the number somewhere. We'll put it up on the screen, but also put it up on freespeechtv.org/donate. Right. Phone number again, 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or online to freespeech.org/donate. Look, we know what's going on in this country. We know, we've been talking about this. We know the outrage that's going on at the border. We know we got to band together and be strong and be tough. We cannot accept a situation where the President of the United States is telling us that he has no choice but to rip families apart at the border, that he can't do anything about it. That is total bunk. We know it. We got to fight back. Free Speech TV is a way to start fighting back. And today, June 20, is the day to take advantage of a $20,000 matching pledge. Double your gift to Free Speech TV by doing it right now. Do it today, and thank you.
This is the Bill Press Show. This is the Bill Press Show.
Yep, Donald Trump says, nothing I can do. No, I can pardon myself, but I can't stop ripping kids away from their parents. Only Congress can do that. Hello, everybody. What do you say on a Wednesday, June 20? Continuing here, the Bill Press Show with the big story and the big outrage of the week of the century with this new zero-tolerance policy put in place by the Trump administration. Joining us here in studio, a woman who's been at the front and center of it back in her home state of Washington State, and here in the Congress, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from the 7th District of the great state of Washington. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Always great to be with you.
You have visited some of these immigrants now being held away from their families I guess, in the Seattle area?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
About a week ago last Friday, I heard that there were over 200 immigrants who were being transferred from the Texas border to just south of Seattle to a federal prison. And I immediately called to find out what was going on. I was able to get entry into the prison for the very next morning. And, it was horrendous.
Were you able to talk to some of these women?
I actually met with all 174. There were 206 total. There were 174 women. There were 32 men. I did not meet with the men. I'm actually going back this Saturday to meet with the men. But I met with all 174 women that were there. And thank goodness I did. We were able to immediately take names and get them help with legal resources. I just heard that over 100 of them have now received legal help from our partners there, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. But it was heartbreaking. I mean, these women, 40% of them had been held in multiple facilities for over a month. Probably about 75% for over 2 weeks in 4 or 5 facilities before being transferred. About 40% of them, 45% of them had children, and all of them had not been able to say goodbye to their children. Almost all of them, except for 2, did not even know where their children were. And they talked about how they were deceived by Border Patrol when, they turned themselves in, they were put in a room with their children. They were told that they needed to go out to get a photograph taken or to go to the judge, and they came back and their children were gone. Did not have a chance to say goodbye to them, explain what was happening. In some cases, they were in rooms that were right next door to where their children were being held, and they could hear them screaming for them. Children as young as 1 year old, Bill, if you can just imagine, 1 year old. And these women were weeping every time they talked about their children. They had the most...
Do they know where their kids are?
No, at that time they didn't know at all. I'm hoping to go back and find out how many of them have figured out, have been able to find their children.
So they couldn't talk with them on the phone?
They had not talked with them, not once, and they were just heartbroken. I'm a mom, and there are parents all out there listening, and you just to think about what this feels like, to have your child just taken from you, the child that you made all kinds of sacrifices for in order to bring them to safety. Because these women, all of them were asylum seekers, every single one of them. And none of them had what's called a credible fear hearing, which is the beginning of the asylum process. They had all been prosecuted in mass prosecution, 75, 100 people at a time, criminally for entering the border. But they came from these unbelievable conditions. Which is the zero tolerance policy. That is the zero tolerance policy. If you cross the border,
you are a criminal.
That's right.
And you are prosecuted as a criminal.
Correct. With no due process, mind you, because 75 people in a court is not due process. But yes, these are asylum seekers. They should not have been criminally prosecuted. But thanks to Jeff Sessions, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, that is what we are doing.
The administration says if they had only crossed at a port of entry, that this would not have happened to them.
First of all, that's they tell so many lies, Bill. It's hard to know where to start. But there are people who are being criminally prosecuted for crossing at the port of entry. That is still happening. But even if you didn't cross at a port of entry, think about what these people are fleeing. And we have had people for a long time that don't cross at a port of entry, but they still are entitled to seek asylum and not be criminally prosecuted. This administration has said, everybody crossing the border, we're going to prosecute you. And they're not giving credible fear hearings even to those who cross at the port of entry. So neither one is true. And they have continued to try to paint people that are crossing the border as gang members, as rapists, murderers, MS-13 animals. And terrorists. I just want the American people to listen to the stories of these women, because one woman was from El Salvador. She had 3 kids. Her oldest kid was shot and killed by gangs. Her second child shot and paralyzed by gangs. She took her third child, leaving her second one behind because she didn't think he could make it, to try to bring one child to safety. Another woman whose 12-year-old daughter had been raped by her husband, a 12-year-old girl had been raped by her husband, and her husband was now threatening to rape her and her children as well. All of these women, when they told me their stories, they talked about how they had gone to the authorities in many cases to ask for help. And in many cases, the authorities were not only, not helpful, but they were complicit. So this is what they're escaping. So the idea that this would serve as a deterrent, first of all, is illegal. The courts have ruled that you can't detain somebody in order to be a deterrent. But secondly, it's not going to work because these people are sacrificing all kinds of things already, making very, very difficult decisions to come to the United States. And just saying that you're going to separate them from your children is not something that they can take into their calculus as they're thinking about coming.
One of your colleagues yesterday, Congressman Elijah Cummings from Baltimore, a great civil rights leader himself, had a word of advice or admonishment to Republican members of Congress yesterday, which I thought was pretty strong, pretty powerful, and right on. Here he is.
We need you to stand up to President Trump. We need you to join us in telling him that we reject this mean policy.
Why are Republicans in Congress not expressing their outrage? For the most part, there may be one or two here or there.
No,
but
it's horrendous. Last week, I ended up sort of taking over a Judiciary Committee hearing because we were talking about some ridiculous bills when we needed to be talking about this. And I said to my Republican colleagues, there must be, I know there are good people on the other side, mothers and fathers. And if you do not say something now, you have to go home to your children and you have to tell them why you allowed this to happen. Imprisoning children, imprisoning people who are seeking asylum, not giving them clean drinking water, not allowing the kids to even know where their children are, building tent cities along the border. What kind of a country are we coming to? And you need to say something. You know, they didn't like it. Actually, most of the Republicans left the room because they're so uncomfortable with this. They're afraid, I think, of the bully in the bully pulpit of the White House, and they're afraid of losing their elections. But here's what I think, Bill, and I know I'm only in Congress for 2 years, but if I can't speak up for the things that really matter, that make this country what we are, then what's the point?
Oh,
just
exactly.
go home, find another job. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, what you did last week or the other day, Congressman Jerry Nadler did yesterday, where he sort of took over a session of the Judiciary Committee. People didn't like it then either because they wanted to talk about Hillary's emails. Well, this was the Oversight Committee.
Right.
Yet another hearing yesterday. In the middle of this crisis, Trey Gowdy calls another hearing on Hillary's emails. And Jerry Nadler just made the same point. Let's talk about the moral crisis that's facing us right now. And that's what we've got to talk about. So what do you hear about these tender age camps? That's what they're calling them, tender age shelters, where they have toddlers. They have 3-month-olds, 4 months. Who's taking care of these babies?
Well, the real problem is, you know, if this were set up for unaccompanied children who are coming across the border, which we have had at various times, that is one thing. You have to have something to do with the unaccompanied children, and the Office of Refugee Resettlement has typically been charged with that. But these are children who have parents. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to take a baby who is breastfeeding away from the breast of her mother and put them in a, quote, tender age, the reason that they are called tender age is because children are vulnerable. So to put them in cages to, you know, some reporters have said that they've gone in with pediatricians and others. The American Association of Pediatrics issued a very strong statement saying that this essentially amounts to child abuse. And I think that is what we are doing. We know that children who are separated from their parents at an early age, no matter where they are going to suffer the consequences of that separation. They are bedwetters. They end up having psychological issues because they don't have the ability to bond with their parents. Everybody knows that is the single most important thing for a child to live a healthy life. And so
I thought especially Republicans, the party of family values, recognize that.
You know, Bill, I think that they have ceded that title. And I said that on Tucker Carlson a couple of months ago. I said this party used to claim to be the party of family values, can't even claim to be a party of family values anymore, because you look at what you're doing to families across this country, the cruelty. It's not just a policy. Look, this isn't this is not just about policy. This is about right and wrong. And I think that everybody across the country knows this. I think Republicans like Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, a huge Trump supporter, has spoken out against this. Laura Bush, very, very eloquent op-ed in the Washington Post, has spoken out against this, compared it to the Japanese internment. I saw former director Hayden yesterday, who was clearly pained on television, and he said he compared this to Nazi Germany. I mean, this people are understanding that whatever the comparison you might want to make, whatever the differences are, that this is horrendous. And I think we have to get our Republican colleagues to think about the country and not about their next elections. Which, by the way, I think it's going to be bad for their next elections. But I don't think this is political. But I think they're making a huge miscalculation on this.
Whit Ayers, who is one of the oldest, meaning he's been at it a long time, and one of the most respected Republican pollsters, was quoted yesterday as just saying, "I don't think putting kids in cages is the way to appeal to suburban moms."
That's correct. And you saw that Donald Trump
I
yesterday...
agree with you. This is a moral issue, not a political
right.
issue. But in this age, and particularly of the midterms, the Republicans are going to have to go out and defend this, because this is a policy put in place by a Republican administration and condoned, in effect, by a Republican Congress.
That's right. And, the meeting, Donald Trump came to the Capitol Hill last night meet with the Republicans. Well, my understanding is that people were not very happy. It did not move the ball on the immigration bills that are here.
One Republican told CNN that yesterday. That was it. It did not move the ball.
It didn't move the ball forward. But also, I heard that, they were really concerned about this family separation policy. And all that Trump really said is, the pictures don't look good. The pictures of crying babies don't look good. When I heard that, I was just livid. I just felt my whole body reacting, because this isn't about what looks good. It is about what is right. And he seems to have no idea of that. But now I'm equally angry at the Republicans who are allowing him to get away with this.
Yeah, and it to me, I mentioned this earlier, it has echoes of the Dreamers program, where everything was going along fine until he created this crisis with the Dreamers.
Well, he likes to do that. He likes to create crises.
And he's done it here too.
He did the same thing. That's correct. And he likes to do that, and then he likes to try to put the focus on Congress. And he has sort of been successful around that with the Dreamers. Like, we're all fighting about what legislation should come to the floor. But everybody understands he was the one who created it. This crisis is particularly horrendous because he has said himself that he is leveraging these children in order to get his wall and his anti-immigrant bills passed. I don't think those bills really have a shot at all of becoming law.
Either
but it's offensive.
Neither one of them.
I mean, if anything had a shot, it would be Ryan's bill. I refuse to call it a compromise bill.
I was going to say the so-called moderate bill.
It is not a moderate bill. It is actually, it does not fix the problem at the border, number one. People should understand that. It actually continues to allow family separation, and in many, many circumstances, and it allows for indefinite detention of families, and it eliminates all the conditions, court-ordered conditions, for detaining somebody. So things like clean water, toilets, all of those things are gone in Ryan's bill, not to mention all the other anti-immigrant provisions that are in there.
Plus it puts the $25 billion up for the wall.
Of course,
right?
Of course. I mean, but it's not about the wall. That's because you remember Chuck Schumer, without talking to most of us, actually offered Donald Trump his money for the wall. We found out later, but Trump said no. So this isn't about the wall. This is about Trump believing that throwing immigration as red meat to a shrinking minority of his base is somehow going to keep him in office and going to keep his base energized. I just don't believe, with every fiber of my body, I believe that the majority of the American people are with us on this. I think the polling that shows that 77%, I think this is an outrageous policy. Of course, 55% of Republicans in that poll still agreeing, but I believe those numbers are much lower. I think people can only sit with this for so long. the more cries they hear from children, the more pictures
that poll
they see.
came out before the pictures came out,
That's
before
right.
the audio,
Before the audio
came out,
yeah.
and before some of the most vile language has come out.
Exactly. I think that number is dipping quickly.
Right. A lot of people say, you know, what can we do about this? You have you announced the other day there is something people can do.
Yes,
yeah?
I'm very excited about the power that we can show as a country.
Walk the walk, huh?
We are putting on a mass mobilization. We've called for a mass mobilization on June 30th. I worked this past weekend very closely with Anna Galland from Move On, Ai-jen Poo from National Domestic Workers Alliance, unions like the NEA, SEIU, AFT, faith groups, the Unitarians, a whole bunch of faith and action people. And we have a big protest, mark it on your calendars, June 30th, Saturday, June 30th, 11 o'clock, Lafayette Square, right in front of the White House. And then people can sign up on familiesbelongtogether.org to find an event near them. In 24 hours, we had over 200 events announced on that website. Over 145,000 people, as of last night, had signed up to participate in actions. We have people self-organizing buses to Washington, D.C. We do want a huge march in Washington, D.C., because we think it's important for the Trump administration to see it right outside of the White House, right in front of his door, because it is his problem. It's a problem he created. It's all of our problems, but it's a problem he created, and it is a problem that he can fix today. If he were to pick up the phone right now, Bill, he could end the suffering for these children, reunite them with their parents, release their parents, give them credible fear hearings. That's what we're calling for with the marches.
Tell me again, it's families...
Familiesbelongtogether.org, and you'll see a map there with dots across the country, coast to coast, red and blue districts, everywhere. People are outraged. You know, because I've been kind of leading on this issue, I've gotten calls from all across the country to my congressional office, and I got to tell you, it is different than anything else I've seen. And Republicans are calling me, and they're saying, I don't agree with you on a whole bunch of things, but I do agree with you on this, and thank you for what you're doing. We cannot let our country become this.
Familiesbelongtogether.org, Saturday, June 30, nothing better to do. Either make your way to Washington or wherever you live. There'll be most likely an event in your city, your town, or whatever.
That's right. And
or
if there isn't, organize it.
one. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Put it together. It reminds me of the March for Our Lives.
Yeah.
March
exactly.
Exactly.
And we know it's a big task. I mean, we would have liked to do it this weekend, but we wanted to give ourselves at least 2 weeks to really put the call out properly. So that's why it's a week from Saturday. And March for Our Lives, I think, had 6 weeks or 5.5 weeks or something like that. Most big marches do. But we don't think this is something we really need to do a lot of organization for. We just need to put the call out, and we believe people will respond.
What happens to these women that you've talked to? You're going to talk to the men. So how long before the families are reunited, or do we know what lies ahead?
We have no idea, and we have put together a letter that we're going to be circulating for sign-on to Kristen Nielsen, who, by the way, I thought she looked uncomfortable at her press conference, but she defended this thing all out. She told a lot of lies herself. I mean,
my God.
She made it sound like a summer camp where kids can just Skype in and talk to their parents. None of these women that I spoke to, not a single one, had been able to talk to their kids, much less known where they are. And
she did make it sound like a summer camp. Oh, these kids are happy; they're being well taken care of. And how dare you suggest?
I actually don't think she has any idea what's going on. And there are 5 agencies.
She had not seen the photos.
She had not seen the photos. She hadn't heard the audio. She said she had gone for a visit, but who knows where she went. There are 5 agencies between the U.S. Marshals.
By the way, I did, but on that point, I did see something. She said she'd been down at one of these centers. But whoever checked it out, the last time she was there was before this policy went in place.
Oh, interesting. I had not heard that. But that does not surprise me, because she did not sound like somebody. If I were the Secretary of Homeland Security, I would be on that border the day that this started to break. I certainly would not allow 2 weeks to go by without even going to visit, talk to people, see what the conditions are. I mean, these women told me, it's a federal prison, remember, the one I went to, because all the ICE detention centers are full thanks to the president's horrible enforcement actions. So they contracted space at 5 federal prisons around the country, transferred 1,600 people. These were 206 of the 1,600 were transferred to this federal prison. I point that out because the women told me that this was the first place that they were treated as human beings. So imagine what the facilities were like before, because this is a full-on prison.
Yeah.
But it is government-owned. It is not privately contracted to for-profit contractors the way most ICE and Border Patrol facilities are. It is unionized employees, and there are some standards that we take into account for these federal prisons, unlike these DHS facilities. And so, these women are telling me that they had no clean drinking water for up to 5 days. They were put in ice, but they called it the ice box because of the frigid temperatures that were there. They were given no blankets, no mats. They came in wet in some cases because they had come out of the river, crossed the river, turned themselves in, and then immediately were put into these freezing conditions. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you would hear perhaps in some other country, but not in the United States.
Just as we close, I want to mention one other thing that happened yesterday. Ambassador Nikki Haley at the UN made an announcement. At the UN, there are many different organizations, parts of it, and one is the Human Rights Council, which we've been a leader on in the past. Nikki Haley announcing yesterday.
As we said we would do a year ago, if we did not see any progress, the United States is officially withdrawing from the UN Human Rights Council.
Now, we're doing so because the Trump administration thinks that some of the moves of this council, where they've criticized Israel for its treatment of the Palestinians, that the whole organization is being anti-Israel, so we're withdrawing. But my question is, after what we're doing down at the border, I'm surprised we weren't thrown out of the Human Rights Council.
Well, seriously. And, and I think it's extremely shameful for America, this moment, because to have Nikki Haley, and they have been talking about withdrawing for some time, but this was done in direct response, your listeners should know, to the UN Human Rights Commissioner, High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is not actually part of the council. It's a separate entity, but still, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights called out the United States for this policy and said that we are violating the rights of the child. So know what dictators do when they don't like something that's said about them. They make sure that person has no more power over them, and they try to do everything they can to undermine them. That is what Nikki Haley did, and I think it looks very bad for the United States. And, beyond this issue, it is a reflection of how much the United States has lost as a global leader on the issue of human rights and, frankly, on the world stage in general.
Yeah, and how can we lecture others about human rights after what we're doing down at the border?
That's right.
Well, Congresswoman, you got your work cut out for you. June 30, march with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and all the millions of Americans who to protest this policy at familiesbelongtogether.org. Thanks, Congresswoman.
Thanks
for coming
Bill.
in.
As always, thanks
Dolores Huerta, a legend in her own time, joining us next here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Yes, believe it or not, Donald Trump says we need an act of Congress to stop us from taking babies away from their mommies. That we as Americans can't do it on our own, don't recognize that it's wrong, can't do it on our own. We need Congress to stop us from doing it. I don't believe that, and I know you don't either. Hello, everybody. What do you say? It is the Bill Press Show here on a Wednesday, June 20. So good to see you today. Thank you for joining us as we join you coast to coast all across this great land of ours from our studio on Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C. With all the news of the day, there is really one dominating story of the day, and that is the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy and the effect that it's having on families at the border. And we learn to every time we turn around, it gets worse and worse. Now we learn that in addition to these tent camps that they've been setting up, they now have so-called tender age camps for toddlers, for 3-month-olds and 6-month-olds. Is this what you want our country to be doing? We look forward to hearing from you. Send us your comments on Twitter at BP Show. And it's a great honor to welcome a longtime friend and a great, great civil rights leader for this country, the one and only Dolores Huerta, to our studio. Hello, Dolores. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Bill. Wonderful to see you, too.
Thank you. We've been working on fighting the same battles for a long time together, so
sure
great to see you. And we'll jump right into it with Dolores here and talk about some of the civil rights challenges of today. But first, as always, Peter with the headlines.
Full Court Press.
Yes, indeed. Just a couple of other stories making news. Bill, do you remember Kevin Spacey, the actor who was removed from House of Cards? In fact, he was in a movie that they reshot just to get him out of the movie because he had allegations of sexual harassment. They took him out of the movie.
They hired somebody else.
They shot. Right. They shot a whole new series of sequences with somebody else. Well, Kevin Spacey was essentially run out of public life because of sexual harassment allegations that were leveled against him. However, he is in a new movie called Billionaire Boys Club. It's based on the true story of an 80s Ponzi scheme, and it will be coming to the big screen.
With him in it.
With him in it. In fact, he has a pretty major role in the movie. The people that are putting out the movie, they came out and said, we don't condone sexual harassment on any level, and we fully support victims of it. At the same time, this is neither an easy nor insensitive decision to release this film in theaters, but we believe in giving the cast the chance to see their final product reach audiences. So it will be coming out into theaters.
So it sounds like it was shot before all this stuff came out.
Before everything happened, yeah. So they didn't want to just leave it on the shelf. They wanted to put it out.
Follow the money.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, last night, Kirstjen Nielsen was still here in Washington, D.C., and she decided she was going to go out to dinner. Mm-hmm. She went to a place called MXDC, a Mexican restaurant.
Oh, yeah, let's go to a Mexican restaurant to show how sensitive we are.
She went to a Mexican restaurant, and somebody found out about it. And protesters mobilized, and protesters went into the restaurant, surrounded her table, and began chanting, "Shame, shame, shame," while she ate her meal. She was escorted out of the restaurant and into her waiting SUV and left. You're right. The optics on this.
I'm supposed to feel sorry for her?
Oh, I don't feel sorry for her in the slightest. But the optics of standing in front of the American public defending the child separation policy and then going to dinner at a Mexican restaurant.
And calling Mexican immigrants criminals, rapists, MS-13 members, and all of that, right? And then going out to a Mexican restaurant to show how fair, right, and open-minded she is or whatever.
Yeah, there've been a lot of progressives who've commented on this and said, like, this is horrible. You shouldn't be. No, I disagree. Go there. Don't let her eat in another restaurant in this town as long as she's here.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Oh, yeah, you think it couldn't get any worse? It just did. When we learned that now the Trump administration, in addition to all those tent camps they set up for kids that have been ripped away from their parents, they've now set up 3 and are about to open a 4th so-called tender age camp for infants. Hello, everybody. It is the Bill Press Show, Wednesday, June 20, coming to you live coast to coast all across this great land of ours. We're joining you online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. We are with you on Free Speech TV, coast to coast, and also joining you on the great WCPT out in the greater Chicago area. And in studio with us, a woman who is a legend in her own time, iconic civil rights leader, the great Dolores Huerta. I must say, on a little personal note, the very first political activity of my life was in San Francisco in the late 60s when I walked a picket line for the first time. It was at the Safeway store just on Market Street, just a little west of Van Ness, to protest table grapes with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. You, I'm sure, don't remember me at that time, Dolores, but I remember you and the great Cesar Chavez there. That was one of the first big movements, right, of the of the farm workers.
Yes, it was. And, of course, we all remember you in California, Bill, for all of the great work that you did there for many, many years before you moved back east.
Thank you.
And
right.
I'm glad that your voice is a national voice now.
Si se puede.
Si se puede.
Okay. And then we worked together again in the Jerry Brown years, and Jerry Brown days when Jerry was first running for president. The great Marshall Gans and Jessica Govea, right? Organized all the grassroots and volunteers in every state where Jerry ran, and Cesar Chavez was very much a part of that. I remember the convention in New York in 1976, and then again in 1980. And you're still at it. First of all, how are the farm workers doing? How's
they're still
UFW doing?
Well, they're still alive and well. You know, I left the union in 2002. They've had some major victories, and they've also had a few legal decisions that have kind of hampered them. Still fighting the growers. The growers are still. They would prefer to spend millions of dollars to fight the union than giving that money to their workers in wages or benefits or pension plans, etc. So the fight is still on, very much in California. The agribusiness industry is very much like Trump. You know, they're still refusing to recognize their workers and giving them the decent wages that they deserve. But the union is still hanging in there, you know.
Is there a minimum wage for agricultural workers?
Well, actually, in California, we have the same minimum wage for farm workers that other workers have. So we don't have a different minimum wage. In some states they do. In California they don't. It's the same minimum wage.
And in California, is it?
It's $11.50, I believe, right now.
Yeah, right. I know it's not 15 yet.
No,
we've been talking about that. But
yeah, it needs to be 15 or more.
What percentage of agricultural workers are undocumented? Do we know? Or?
Well, actually, quite a number of them. As you know, the growers actually go down into Mexico and recruit workers. Yeah. But now with the deportations, there have been a lot of raids, as you know, a lot of deportations. And they kind of doubled down on California because of we passed the sanctuary state law, and so there have been a lot of deportations. But what the growers and the Trump administration are planning to do is bring in more foreign workers. So they're deporting workers that have families here that have been here for many years, and at the same time they're going to be bringing in and are bringing in what they call guest workers, H-2A workers, to replace the workers that have been deported from Mexico primarily, but they also bring them in sometimes from other countries like the Philippines or Thailand, places like that. But the terrible thing about that kind of a situation is that when the people that they bring in, the H-2A workers, they're not covered by Social Security. They're not covered by minimum. They are covered by minimum wage. They're trying to change that, but they don't get disability insurance. They don't get unemployment insurance. As I said, they don't get Social Security. And guess what? The local economies are devastated because the workers that are brought in as H-2A workers or guest workers, they send all their money back home. They don't spend in the local economy.
Yeah, their families are not there. They're not buying.
Not there. And so the undocumented workers that are here, they do spend their earnings in the local economy. So a lot of these communities are going to be devastated.
What is you? I know you've been following what's going on now at the border. First, when we first got involved in this issue in California, it was probably true that there were a lot of people coming across the border illegally, and whether it was a flood, I don't know, but compared to what it was 20, 25, 30 years ago, what's the situation today at the border?
Well, we know that the border crossings have been declining over the years, not only now, but, and now I think it's at the lowest point ever. And yet you would not think that with the way that Trump is speaking about the border crossings. But.
Right. And have you ever seen anything like the policy that they're implementing now in terms of this zero tolerance policy and what it means for families?
No, well, it's horrible. And I think that Trump needs to examine his conscience, and he has to acknowledge the fact that he is just an out-and-out racist. He's got this vendetta against people from Mexico, people from Latin America, people of color. But his latest remarks when he talks about immigrants infesting the United States, I mean, first of all, when this is a country that was built by immigrants, it's starting way back when, and not just immigrants from Europe, but immigrants from Mexico, from the Philippines, from China, Japan, and India. You're from California, so you know all of these communities that were here building this country, many of them before the European big wave of immigrants from Europe came here to the United States of America. And somehow Trump doesn't, his lack of an education, it manifests itself in the policies that he is producing. And as people have said often, with one phone call, he can stop this craziness. He has, as you know, made so many executive decisions since he's become the president of the United States, and he prides himself on being able to pick up the phone or make sign an executive decision. And yet what he's done on the whole immigration issue is by kicking it back to the Congress the way that he does, especially with the DACA students, and now with this policy with separating families from their children. I mean, this is just cruel. It's cruel, and it's unjust, and it's unnecessary, and he is creating so much pain, and he seems to relish in this pain. So we have to wonder, what kind of a president is this that he seems to relish on hurting people? And when we combine that with what happened in Puerto Rico, again...
I was going to ask you about that. We... and you probably have to admit that FEMA did a pretty good job in Texas and Louisiana and Florida, but then along comes Puerto Rico. Do you think he even knew they were Americans?
Oh, I think he didn't know. And then, when he did that insulting thing of throwing paper towels at people, I mean, what did that stand for? It's just a humiliation and abusive, and so I don't know.
That was his watch me. I can fix this, right? And he stands there throwing paper towels at the crowd. Yeah.
What was that intention? And what was the meaning of that?
What do you hear from Puerto Rico today?
Oh, well, we know that people are still suffering. That many places still don't have electricity. And of course, many people just had to leave. And I think we have to worry about what's going to happen to Puerto Rico, because we know that there's people who are in the real estate market that are going down there, and they're buying up plots of land. So many people maybe will never be able to return to Puerto Rico because it's going to become some kind of a big tourist industry where the local people will not be able to afford to live there. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Puerto Rico.
Back to this zero tolerance policy at the border, is there any effort to support these families or support these kids? Is there anything that can be done? I mean,
one of the things
just the stories that we hear. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal was talking about these women that she met in Seattle, and they don't know where their kids are. They can't get in touch with them. They haven't communicated with them, been able to communicate them in the last couple of months. And as hard as that is on the mothers, these kids they don't know where their parents are, and have had no contact with them at all.
Yeah, and apparently they don't have any kind of a protocol or procedures to even keep track of the kids that they're separating from their mothers, I mean, this is just, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, I think, for the families, for the children, and I think it should be a nightmare for our country of the United States of America. What is the world thinking about what we do? I mean, that is like the ultimate cruelty that you can, impair on a family. It's terrible. So I don't know. I think maybe what might have to happen is that some of the states may have to take control. Of course, in Texas again, where we see that
right.
There hasn't been very much love for the Latino community in Texas from the previous governors, or even from Ted Cruz, who's a senator. But maybe some. We know that the Catholic Church, which is not very good on a lot of issues that we care about.
Right.
But this is the one issue that they are very good at, is stepping up in the churches, trying to get more involved. And of course, they are in those communities where this is happening. So, but there needs to be some drastic steps and taken soon before more of these families lose connections with each other. I mean, as you know, Bill, I'm the mother of 11 kids, and I cannot even imagine. I traveled a lot, but my children were always taken care of by different families. We had a daycare center in the United Farm Workers to make sure that our kids were always safe. But just to, and we know that we don't even know where these children are, whether the people that are taking care of them are even qualified to take care of them.
No, I was thinking about these tender age camps. I mean, if you're taking care of 2-year-old, 3-year-old, little toddlers, that's just not something that like a total unqualified, untrained stranger can do.
Right, and even the older children. I mean, because the babies aren't conscious of what's happening. At least, maybe emotionally, they may be suffering because they're separated from their parents. But the older children that are conscious of what's going on, I mean, we could just kind of imagine what's happening to them.
Right. Mm-hmm. There's just no words to describe it other than it is cruel. It is inhumane. It is evil. It's immoral. I mean, First Lady Laura Bush, who's someone, again, the Bush family that we haven't thought of as being necessarily right on all the issues, but boy, she spoke out so strongly and so right, and compared this to the internment camps for the Japanese. I said this morning, when you look at the pictures of those tents, and I remember the pictures of the tents for the Japanese Americans that we've seen in from World War II in the California desert, just the same.
And
the families were intact, were together.
They were
at
together.
least.
Yeah, definitely. They didn't take the children away from the mothers and the fathers. The other thing too is I think that one thing we seem to have like a very short memory in the United States. We've forgotten the wars in Central America, when we devastated those countries in El Salvador and Honduras, Nicaragua, all of those countries, and with all of the wars that were going on there, that the United States was supporting and paying for, and then we never went back to clean up the mess. We just destabilized all of those countries. Some of them have been able to get themselves back together again. Some of them haven't. Well, the other thing on the deportations that were taking place in New York City and other places like that, where judges were, when you would have like gang members come before a judge and they would give them a choice: do you want to go to jail or do you want to go back to El Salvador? So they were, setting a lot of these instead of getting these young people and trying to rehabilitate them, sending them back to El Salvador. And so when you talk about these gangs like MS-13, well, it was judges in the United States of America that created that problem in El Salvador. Instead of, keeping them here, keeping them in jail, trying to rehabilitate them, and because they were young people that were involved in these gangs, and we know young people that their brains haven't reached the maturity level yet. Yeah. But they were sending them back. And so, again, we in the United States were responsible. And we don't take responsibility for many of the problems that we create in other countries, And I like to use the word bananas all the time. When you think of the millions of bananas that we consume in the United States and the millions of dollars that we have spent for bananas, but that money, the bananas that we eat, that are produced and grown in the Central American countries, the money never gets back to those countries. It goes to our American corporations like Dole and Chiquita Banana. And, I think maybe, too, we have to call on our corporations to say, you guys have got to step in here. All of you people who contribute to Donald Trump, who have made his presidency possible, you've got to start speaking out also. We have almost everybody now, including members of the Republican members of the Congress, that is speaking out about what's happening at the border. What about the corporations? We need to hear their voices also.
Right, and you don't hear their voices. But I'm glad you raised the point about the history of the United States in Central America. As you know, I've been down there in Nicaragua several times, and El Salvador and the rest. And we helped create a lot of the conditions that these people today are fleeing.
Right.
And they're real dangers that they're fleeing. It is gang violence, it's domestic violence, it's civil war. And they're coming here fleeing that. And then again, but Jeff Sessions says it doesn't matter whether you're fleeing gang violence or domestic violence or whatever. We don't want you. And if you cross the border, we treat you as a criminal, and that's of course what they're doing. When one of the other things that you and I worked on way back when, and the farm workers were so much a part of it, then were voter registration drives in California. And it was always a big challenge until Prop 187, and Pete Wilson put that initiative on the ballot. And then, as people said, kind of woke the sleeping giant, right? What's going on today I know you're very much a part of this, in Texas, in California, in border states, whatever, to get the Latino community registered to vote and active in politics? What are you seeing?
Well, I think what's happening right now with the Trump administration is motivating a lot of the Latinos to be able to register and to vote. And as you know, California, we're pretty much a pretty blue state, except where I come from, the Central Valley of California.
Yeah, we got a ways to go there.
I'm still there. Kevin McCarthy is my congressman.
Oh, no,
yeah,
really?
Well, Bakersfield. I live in Bakersfield.
I hope you drive him crazy.
Well, unfortunately, he's got a pretty solid Republican district, but it'll take a few years to be able to change Kevin. And he won't even open his doors at his office. You can. The only way you can possibly get into his office if you sneak in behind some Anglo person that's going in there, which we've done a couple of times, to do sit-ins in there. He will not open. His door is closed to the community, completely closed.
Won't even meet with you or talk about.
I might try to meet with him while I'm here now that all this stuff is going on, but it's he's just like plays like he's deaf and dumb, It's really sad, but the problem in the Central Valley is changing. I think we have some possible challenges to Devin Nunes, who has also had a very shameful presence right now in the Congress and trying to cover up whatever Trump does and giving information to Trump, which he shouldn't be giving him, and possibly in the other district, the 21st, where we might have a good shot at getting a Democrat there, Valadeo, who is a congressman there, who's just had his property seized by the bank.
Oh, really?
He's always treated himself as a successful businessman, but now it turns out that he wasn't so successful after all. Even after getting all these subsidies for his dairy farms, he didn't manage that money very well. But I want to tell you about Texas, okay?
Yes.
We know that in Texas, more people have been voting than before. But you know what the problem is in Texas, Bill? People can't register to vote. Back in 1963 in California, I passed a bill in the state legislature that anybody who was a citizen and voting could register somebody else to vote. In Texas, you can't do that. Texas had the same registration policies that we had in California back in the 50s.
So that you have to be a certified
deputy registrar, and then you have to get certified every year.
Oh yeah, in California, anybody can circulate a petition to
Not only that, in California, you can vote on your cell phone or your computer. You're automatically registered at the DMV. When you get your driver's license, you're automatically registered. So, but in Texas, you can't register to vote. You've got to find a deputy registrar somewhere. And that deputy has to register you to vote, and that you can't. They don't have the vote by mail like we have in California. You've got to be out of the country or something crazy like that to be able to vote. And so, Texas always prides themselves as being number one, and we've got to say that they're right there up at the top of not making it feasible or possible for people to register.
Well,
to
this
vote.
is all part of the voter suppression
Exactly.
effort in state after state after
Right,
state,
right.
particularly with the red states.
Mhm.
And the Supreme Court last week let Wisconsin off the hook on
Right.
that. No, it was
Ohio. Yeah, it's purging
Ohio.
purging their rolls.
Purging their rolls.
Mhm.
So, is anybody like Beto O'Rourke or other people in Texas on this issue and trying to change
Well,
it?
I think it looks. I'm not sure that they are. In fact, when I speak to people in Texas, often they're even unaware of the fact that their voter registration policies are like ancient, like 50 years behind California. They don't even realize that. But I think with Beto O'Rourke running, I think there's a lot of right now a lot of enthusiasm, and we see that in the last primaries that they had more people voting than ever before. So it looks. I think it looks positive.
Right. In some of those red districts in Texas, even where they haven't Democrats haven't won, their turnout has been historically high. So, and that's all grassroots.
Right.
Grassroots.
Exactly. Mhm.
Right.
So there's hope in Texas.
Well, I think there's a lot of hope nationwide. I mean, there are areas where there didn't used to be such a big Latino population, but now there are. I mean, Maryland, District of Columbia, Virginia.
New York State.
New York State, right.
And hopefully a lot of the Puerto Ricans that had to flee Puerto Rico, that had to leave Puerto Rico because of the situation there, hopefully they will register to vote because they can make a really big difference in states like Florida, states like New York, and some of the other states where many Puerto Rican families had to resettle.
And more Latinos are running for and getting elected to state legislatures, governorships, Congress.
Right. Yeah.
So that's hopeful too.
It
right?
is.
I mean, I was just thinking, we still haven't had a Latino governor of California.
Well, Antonio Viragosa was running, but he had a little handicap there, and that is that many of the labor unions are upset with him, and particularly the teachers union because of his affinity for charter schools, and that, of course, is a really big issue because we know that the private charter schools are, or I should say, the for-profit charter schools are really a menace to public education, and I think that's something that people need to be more aware of. That will pretty much wipe out public education for the poor people, especially working people.
I was disappointed that Antonio, who's a friend of both of ours, went there on the charter schools. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand it. So, as a longtime activist and civil rights leader, people who are outraged by this zero tolerance policy and what we see happening to families at the border, what's the best thing people are frustrated and they want to do something. They want to go down there and stop it today, but what's your suggestion? What can people do? What's the best way to plug in and show their outrage here?
Well, I think I'm going to quote Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker.
Yeah.
I happened to see his show on Broadway. We got free tickets.
Oh, did you? Yeah, right.
We were following
I would hope so.
We were following the documentary Dolores that was made by Carlos Santana, a film about my work with the farm workers. Anyway, but he said to the audience, you've got to do three things. Every day when you wake up in the morning, you've got to do three things. Of course, we wash our faces, we brush our teeth, and you call your congressperson. So I think calling...
That's good.
Yeah, calling...
Wash your face, brush your teeth, call your member of Congress.
Right. And I think everybody can do that. We can just flood the Congress right now and say, you've got to do something, you've got to act. We know that there's some bills that are coming up this week for a vote on immigration. We hope that they will be defeated because one of them, of course, is very onerous. Very onerous.
One would just about end even legal immigration.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
And tell them to please vote against that bill, and especially people in the heartland. I just came from Chicago. In Chicago, we have the city of Chicago is pretty liberal, but they call it the heartland. And I said to people in Chicago, by the way, this is a great immigration conference where I spoke at,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got to reach out to the other states that are around them in the rural parts of Illinois and say, get the heart back in the heartland, okay? Because so many of those Congress people that come from those Midwestern states are the ones that are big Trump supporters,
Yeah.
And so they have to choose between Trump and children,
Yeah, I like that. Put the heart back in the heartland. Have you, while you're in town, have you met or are you going to meet with Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Justice Ginsburg?
No, I wish I could. I don't know her. Yeah, I have met Sandra Sotomayor, but I haven't met Ginsburg. Yeah.
Right. Because I see you and Ruth Bader Ginsburg as two peas in a pod, kind of, in terms of
we're hanging
great women leaders, hanging in there a long time, and just paving the way for so many other Americans and expanding, our opportunities in this country. The great work that both of you have done, pioneers, really American pioneers, and so you should. It'd be nice to get the two of you together, I think.
Yeah.
And you have your documentary, and she's got her documentary.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. That's
RBG,
wonderful.
which we saw, Carol and I saw about a week ago.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. I haven't seen it yet, but, I'm still working. I have my own foundation now, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We're working there in the Central Valley, trying to, as Jim Lawson says, dismantle the systems of oppression. We have filed lawsuits against Kern County for lack of representation on the Board of Supervisors. We're working on another lawsuit against Tulare County, where David Nunes is at, for the same reason, lack of representation. We've sued our high school board, again, for discriminations against Latinos and African Americans, which, by the way, is something that's happening all over the country. They used to call it dropouts. We now know they're not dropouts, they're pushouts. And so we're working in 10 different school districts in the Central Valley right now.
Do you have a website if people want to
keep
it's
up? DoloresHuerta.org.
DoloresHuerta.org. DoloresHuerta.org.
And here I'm on the board of People for the American Way. Norman Lear's great organization.
Yeah, great organization.
And we're doing as much as we can also on the national level to work on immigration issues, LGBT issues, voting issues. People for also has a great organization in the South, working with many of the African American ministers, and we see some of that manifesting itself, like in the votes for Stacey Abrams, who's running for the governor of Georgia.
Right.
So.
Yes. Great candidate. Dolores Huerta, still going strong. DoloresHuerta.org. Dolores Huerta Foundation.
Right? No, this is the Dolores Huerta Foundation, but it's DoloresHuerta.org, and that's
DoloresHuerta.org.
And that's with an O, D-O. A lot of people say spell my name with an E, but it's DOLORES.
DoloresHuerta.org.
And it's HUERTA.
All right. Oh, still going strong after all these years. It's so good to see you, Dolores. Thanks so much for coming in.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
And your great leadership for so many years. And when we come back, another great progressive Congressman, Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, joining us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Hey, it's time to talk about the Free Speech Pledge Drive again, the Spring Pledge Drive. A lot of you have stepped up to the plate so far, but too many of you haven't. And now we got some really, really exciting news today. Maybe this will prompt you to finally get on the stick here and make your pledge, your contribution to Free Speech TV. We're announcing here a matching pledge. It's today only. Get this, $20,000. Yeah, whole group of very loyal and very dedicated and very generous Free Speech TV watchers and supporters have banded together. They put up $20,000 as a matching pledge for today only to take advantage of this. And what that means is up to $20,000. Think about it. Every dollar you give, every $5 you give, every $10, every $20, every $100 you give will be doubled for Free Speech TV. So this gets you into the big time. Think about it. Make a $250 contribution. You're a $500 supporter to Free Speech TV. $500, you're a $1,000 supporter to Free Speech TV. Or even if it's only $25, you're a $50 sponsor to Free Speech TV. This is a great opportunity. This is the real motivation for you to make your pledge today. No other day is going to be like this. This is one unique opportunity. So seize the opportunity. Make your contribution today to Free Speech TV. We always tell you, no gift is too small. No gift is too big. Depends on what you can do. We know you all love Free Speech TV to the extent that you're able to help as generously as you can. And every dollar you give, doubled on this day only, Wednesday, June 20. The way to make that pledge, of course, is to go to the phones here. And I know I've got the number somewhere. We'll put it up on the put it up on the screen, but also put it up on freespeechtv.org/donate. Right. Phone number again, 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or online to freespeech.org/donate. Look, we know what's going on in this country. We know, we've been talking about this. We know the outrage that's going on at the border. We know we got to band together and be strong and be tough. We cannot accept a situation where the President of the United States is telling us that he has no choice but to rip families apart at the border, that he can't do anything about it. That is total bunk. We know it. We got to fight back. Free Speech TV is a way to start fighting back. And today, June 20 is the day to take advantage of a $20,000 matching pledge. Double your gift to Free Speech TV by doing it right now. Do it today, and thank you.
This is the Bill Press Show. This is the Bill Press Show.
Here we go, Wednesday, June 20. Yes, indeed. Donald Trump says, I can pardon myself. I can start a war. But I can't change a policy that I instituted to separate families, kids from their parents. What do you say, folks? It is the Bill Press Show on this Wednesday, June 20, coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and make a note of the American Federation of Teachers, the great men and women teachers of America under President Randy Weingarten, the members of the AFT, doing great work in the classrooms of America every day, and even doing great work during their summer vacation. We salute them and thank them for the support of the program, and they are raising hell all across the country, and it's great to see them do so, and it's also great to welcome to the studio one of the outstanding progressive leaders of the United States Congress, co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin. Congressman, always good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Bill.
And I know I saw a picture of you and Congressman David Cicilline, Senator Chris Van Hollen down at the border a couple of days ago.
Yeah, Jeff Merkley.
Jeff Merkley
Peter
was
Welch,
there, that's right. Yeah.
Vicente Gonzalez.
Right. What did you discover down there?
What we discovered is Donald Trump has instituted a cruel, inhumane, un-American policy of separating families. But it's even more than that. He's making it harder for people to come to a legal point of entry to claim asylum, which is the legal process. But he's making it so difficult that he's basically forcing people to come into the country other ways to flee the violence. And then he arrests them and puts them in part of his surge of trying to say there's a surge of people coming across the border, when in reality the surge is that his ruling and how he's dealing with this is just different than everyone else has ever done. So now we visited a processing center where that's where the chain link cages are that people are held in.
No, I'm sorry, they're not cages. They just use chain link fence to build the walls. Right?
Chain link, the material and construction is the same as the dog run in our backyard, just less tall. It's taller at the facilities they have out there because it's a cage when it's enclosed. So it's a cage. And if you are 4 or under at that point, you are kept with one of your parents because your parents are separated. Your parents are separated from each other, from their children. The brothers and sisters are separated. I mean, it's as cruel as possible. But if you're 5 years old, you are considered old enough to be on your own, and you can be put into a small chain cage area with 50 strangers you don't know. At 5 years old, think about if you go to the mall, and if you're 5 years old, you lose your parents, you're crying, you're going through all the trauma. This is completely removed and maybe not seeing for days at that point. I asked when we got there, how often do they see their children when they're here? And they said, oh, yeah, it's pretty often. I go, give me a time, 15 minutes, 2 hours. Oh, 15 minutes. Well, the only person they actually let us talk to, we talked to a few other people while we were there, but the only person that they let us talk to was a woman who had been there for 2 days and hadn't seen her 13-year-old daughter in 2 days. So what we found very quickly was they didn't represent the truthfully, a.k.a. lied, to us on a pretty regular basis. They told us that the goal is to get people out in 12 hours. The most is 72 hours. The people that I talked to, other than that woman that was there for 2 days, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. And this is literally on top of each other with a little mat. I said, where are the pillows? Oh, the mat has cushion. That was the answer they had. And then from there, you actually get separated to a detention facility. And what we found out at the end of the day by talking to some of the mothers at the ICE detention center was that, 2 of them, their child was in a detention center in Florida. One was in New York. So we're not just separating by different rooms, different buildings within the same area, but states apart. And in one mother also, and I thought this was really telling too, said they don't ask you anything. Does your child have allergies, any illnesses? Have they ever been traumatized? Like anything. So you just literally are taking them away like they're property rather than human beings, and then you're housing them in either cage-like situations or the Super Walmart that is now the Trump Super Detention Center, where you have 1,500 kids, boys 10 to 17, housed in a Super Walmart center. And I think while the staff try to do the best they can, what we got to remember, no matter how much Donald Trump lies about this, the surge happened in the last 6 or 8 weeks when he changed the policy. So they went from 500 people to 1,500 people. They're just hired over 800 new employees in the last week, this company that runs some of these, that's contracted to run them. And they said they're 90 mental health professionals short to actually deal with what they need to deal with. So, again, this is done in the most inhumane, cruel, un-American way possible. And, that's just a start of what I saw.
So several things that the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself says, that, first of all, that this is a law. He's required by law to do this, a law passed by Democrats.
Yeah, how come this all happened in the last 6 or 8 weeks? We're not in control of Congress. We didn't pass any law changes. This is Donald Trump doing a policy for 2 reasons. I think the 20% reason is he's trying to send a message to people in other countries not to come here. The 80% message is I think he wants to get money to build a wall. And that's only because his racist supporters, who he loves when they go to a rally and they give him all the love that only a narcissist can possibly have, will give him that support. That's like air or water to him. So that's why he's doing it. He's doing this for leverage for the wall. So he's using children as political devices in order to get money for a wall we don't need, but in order to get the adoration from the people that used to wear white sheets and now feel like they can go out in the open and don't have to wear them.
So he also says that only Congress can fix this.
Computer says no.
Yeah, right.
Once again, not true. This is one where Donald Trump broke it. He can fix it. He broke DACA. He could fix it, right? Over and over. But he keeps doing the same action just to get the wall. But in the last decade, we've had reverse migration, right? I mean, this is not a problem that we currently have, but for his base, for a portion of his base, but a decent-sized portion of his base, this is a really important issue. Yesterday someone said it, and I really thought deeply about this, but, this is about keeping people who aren't white out of the country. Like, we're not doing this to keep people coming from Poland or Germany or Norway out of the country. We're doing this to keep people who maybe have a darker colored skin. And again, it just comes back to me that, this is done for racist reasons primarily. And again, it just, I didn't think my opinion of Donald Trump could go much lower. And at this point, I realize I'm digging into the ground with my opinion on him.
What happened at this meeting yesterday? He came up to the Hill yesterday. So to the extent that he says this is Congress is responsible, not me, blaming Congress, and only Congress can fix it, and Congress has to fix it. We know who's been in charge of Congress for the last 2 years,
yes.
Right? So he comes up to meet with the Republicans yesterday. What kind of reception did he get, and what happened?
From what I can tell, because it happened right before we had votes, was, first of all, I was told they didn't take questions. He just came. They talked about a few other subjects. They didn't just talk about this subject. But the bottom line is...
Did anybody take him on? Inside that caucus? Did anybody challenge him?
I'm seeing the same reports you are, Bill, quite honestly, on this, because we haven't, it happened so quick before the votes. But Paul Ryan says he doesn't support the policy. then put a real measure on the floor, not the bullshit that we have this week that he's putting on that's not going to deal with the issue, and rediscover the spine that he once had and do something. I mean, we're a co-equal branch of government.
Paul Ryan once had a spine?
I believe he did. I believe there are some early photos when in his youth. We just haven't seen it.
Not since he came to Congress, but anyway, I know what you mean. I'll
tell you, he's my neighbor, neighboring district. Paul's a very friendly person. He's Wisconsin nice. He's a smart person. And he at one time took on Donald Trump when occasionally he needed to during the campaign.
Right.
I'm old enough to remember when he sort of threatened to not endorse Donald Trump.
Exactly. And now you would think that, Donald Trump has adopted him through an adopt-a-puppy program, and he sits at the side and rolls over and every now and then gets a belly rub for adoration, and that's what we're doing. So I really lost, for me it's hard because when it becomes personal like that and I watch someone who I know is so much better, I really am discouraged because I don't want anyone to think that's how people in Wisconsin think, because we are a fair and, good folks up there, and Paul Ryan completely misrepresents us. So, but he needs to do something. Mitch McConnell needs to do something. But Donald Trump can take care of what he broke, and he simply hasn't done it.
So is there going to be a legislative congress? You mentioned DACA before, and I keep coming back to this. This is so reminiscent to me of what happened with the Dreamers program. And yet they're still languishing out there in limbo. So, in effect, Donald Trump accomplished what he set out to accomplish. With this, and Congress didn't do anything. Is there going to be any legislative fix at all, or is this just going to...
It's a great question for Paul Ryan. I'm hoping that he gets lots of actions wherever he goes this weekend, because he rarely comes back to Wisconsin. It's pretty much he's on fundraising duty 24/7. But, this is one where there is a big day of action coming up on the 30th.
Yes, Pramila Jayapal was just telling us about that.
Oh, good. Yeah, and she's been...
Saturday, June
we spent
30.
the last couple of days together in New York City working on things. Familiesbelongtogether.org is the site, and there's going to be a big rally here, but I think more importantly, there's big rallies across the country. There's several hundred of them so far, and that's where we need to take it to the streets. Hopefully, I actually believe with the pressure right now, when the U.S. Chamber comes out and does a statement against this.
You told me about off the air. So the U.S. Chamber yesterday came out. And
said, and I was told, and I have not seen this directly, but I was heard the Trump brothers put out a statement against this.
Koch brothers.
I'm sorry, the Koch brothers. Thank you. Same difference.
It's easy to get them confused.
At some point when you own something that closely, you could call it whatever you want. So, but they're coming out. So, I mean, this is one, the faith community that backed him is largely coming out against this. I mean, he doesn't have much left other than that portion of his support, which is significant still, that are racist. That's the only way you can say it anymore. I mean, I just, to sugarcoat it doesn't do any good when he's doing things that are this cruel and inhumane, because it hurts America around the world. And that's, it's time that Republicans realize it's country first, not party first. And it's not even a party anymore. It's a cult now because they do whatever Donald Trump wants. They used to have some values. I didn't agree with their values, but now it's meaningless. They're nothing more than a cult of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned who else? He is more and more isolated, but he still has Jeff Sessions, Stephen Miller, John Kelly, and Kirstjen Nielsen. But Trump, number one. I mean, he's the one who's driving the train, right?
Well, I mean, and watching Kirstjen Nielsen has been really depressing because, could anyone suck up any greater? I don't know where she goes to work other than maybe Fox and Friends after this, but I don't know where you take this. Well, exactly. And it's just, again, at some point, you're not loyal to a cult leader. You're loyal to the country, and we need more of these people. I don't expect Stephen Miller to do the right thing, honestly, but I do expect other people to stand up and recognize how bad this is. And, we really need more Republicans to stand up. This may be the first time we're seeing a bipartisan outrage to what he did finally. And we'll find out if they try to do something right. But what's on the bill right now, what's on the session that we're voting on this week so far is not a real fix. We'll see if they try to actually amend it to be a real fix.
Your point on Kirstjen Nielsen, there have been so many people who came into the administration saying, and with the reputation that they're like reasonable, thoughtful people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We heard that about John Kelly. We heard that about James
yeah.
Mattis. We've heard that about Kirsten Nielsen. Turns out, not at all. They're not reasonable at all.
He wants one thing and one thing only, the individual adoration from everyone who works for him. We saw him when he came back from meeting with Kim Jong-il. He said, well, it's great. He says something, they all jump up and stand attention. He wants to be treated like a dictator.
I wish the American people would would treat me the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. If he only could just completely be a dictator without any pesky Congress or FBI or anything else, he could just do things so much easier.
You know, the question that came up with Kirsten Nielsen, and she said she was offended by the question, but it's still lingering out there, I think, which is, did they deliberately do this in order to stir up controversy so they could use it as a wedge to get their wall? Or is it...
Oh, absolutely. As I said, that's 80%. 20%, I think, is to send a message to the people who are coming largely from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, where there's a lot of gang violence and other issues that are affecting people, which is why they're coming here.
By the way, Jeff
to seek
Sessions
asylum.
has admitted that. He admitted that with Laura Ingraham the other night, that, oh, yeah, we now people will...
But I think that's a 20% of the message.
Yeah.
The other 80% is he's desperate to get the wall. And we all know there's not a factual basis to try to get a wall. This is so that when he does a rally, which I believe he's doing tonight in Duluth, Minnesota, it's so that he gets the adoration of his MAGA followers, especially that probably 50% of that base of his that really are there for reasons that they don't want to see the country look different, a.k.a. Browner or blacker. And that is the definition of racism.
Right. I want to ask you about a couple of other issues, Wisconsin related. The Supreme Court ruled on Wisconsin's redistricting plan this week, sort of kicking the can back to Wisconsin, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, they kicked it back based on standing, and I was talking to a friend.
How bad are the lines?
Pardon?
How bad?
Well, on the congressional level, just to give you an idea, Democrats got 100,000 more votes in 2016 than Republicans, and they have 5 of the 8 seats. Just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
On legislative lines, it's even worse. It's very gerrymandered. It's very hard to try to take back the majority in the assembly. There's a number of +5 Republican districts. Now, what they didn't plan on is right now a +5 is a -4 or something like that, So we do have some shots to take it back, but it's a very, very difficult normal cycle given what they've done. In the state Senate, they've picked up 2 special elections in Wisconsin with these gerrymandered lines.
Right.
Now they're only 2 away. So it's not quite working as well as they had hoped, but it's very clearly gerrymandered in order to try to maintain
majorities. So the court said, take it back to Wisconsin and try it again in the trial court.
Yeah, and I think, again, this is from someone I talked to who I have a lot of respect for, who knows this arena and actually predicted this exact outcome to me on Friday. Said part of it was standing. They probably needed someone from every assembly district to be on it rather than I think they had 7 people in the state on it, because that way it would give better standing for trying to address the maps across the state. And so I think it's just really how they structure it, and they can bring it back, but they need to try to get it moving by 2020 so that we can try to impact the next process.
So you mentioned picking up this a couple of Senate seats in Wisconsin. I think you and I talked about one of those at least before. And these were progressives who were running in deep red districts, right?
17 plus Trump districts. The last one was a 24 plus Walker district that we picked up. And this is the one, don't forget, Scott Walker didn't want to schedule this second election. We had basically Eric Holder had to come in and sue him to do it. He called the election. Now we know I didn't want to call it. Even in a district that voted for Scott Walker by 24 points, you can lose these days because our base is very motivated. Their base is still unsure, and things like taking kids away from parents certainly doesn't help that, in my opinion. And then there's a third phenomena that we saw both in that first Senate election and we saw in the Supreme Court race we had in Wisconsin in April, where first time since 96, an open seat we picked up with a progressive. Was there's a suburban factor where people who aren't necessarily Democratic or Republican are just tired of being forced into awkward conversations with their kids about porn stars and S-holes and very fine Klansmen and Nazis. They may not be super political, but they didn't want to have those conversations with their kids, and that's their decision. And they feel like they've been forced to, and this isn't the America that they want to be able to represent to their kids. So they're coming out and voting for us. So we're seeing this around the country. 44 state legislative seats now have flipped from Republican to Democrat since Trump got in, only 4 the other direction. That's 11-to-1 ratio. I like that number.
And then, so how do you assess the tension, and you can't deny it, between the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the establishment wing of the Democratic Party? Are progressives winning, and are establishment Democrats still fighting against that? Or
well, on the ground, clearly the moment is for progressives, right? It's the reason we have the surge of our base coming out. It's because of progressives in reaction to what Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing. So we would be wise to recognize where the people are at. I used to always say this saying, and I finally printed up bumper stickers for my campaign this year that say, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. That's what's happening right now. So if the people,
a big bumper sticker.
It is actually that, and then a little logo. It's a lot of stuff on a bumper sticker. But we wanted to get. I love that saying. The other saying that we printed was,
Gandhi said that. There go the people. I must follow them because I'm their leader.
Yeah. And so if people keep doing the actions they're doing, eventually the elected officials do follow. And we're seeing that. And quite honestly, some of the challenges that have gone even to incumbents around the country is good for the movement at the end of the day, because it's showing that we're not just going to accept, if you get elected, you go back to making sure the big banks are still big, right? That's not what people want. The swamp to the average person is not just the special interests that operate here, but it's the big corporations and the big banks and everyone who's essentially made the economy rigged against them getting ahead. And we did polling on this for the Progressive Caucus in 30 competitive districts. The swamp was brilliant by Donald Trump. When he said drain the swamp, he just didn't tell him he was dredging it bigger and putting a high-rise luxury condo on it. He brought his own swamp creature in.
Yeah.
But they recognize the swamp to be big corporations and big banks. So if we aren't bold enough to say what we already know, then shame on us. We don't deserve to be in the majority. But this is the moment for progressives, and I think our job is to inside to try to focus that on the incumbents who are here, and on the outside is to elect more progressives.
As a progressive, I keep getting asked about Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania. As you know, he was up against the Republican in the 18th district in a 20-plus Trump district. And there were some of the progressive organizations that did not support him because they didn't think he was progressive enough. This was not in the primary. This is in the general election.
Yes. So I'll tell you, what got me was when he came and talked to us, he said the main issues why he won. And, we know he talked about the tax policy, but the 4 that he identified to the caucus were, and hopefully I remember them the exact way he did, he talked about trade from a progressive perspective. He talked about organizing unions and workers having a voice, a progressive economic populist message. He talked about protecting Social Security and Medicare, a progressive economic message, and then he talked about opioids. 3 of the 4 were populist progressive messages. So, is he going to...
Opioids isn't bad.
Isn't bad, but I'm just saying, but the rest are in a populist economic sense. That's why he won. So we are smart to recognize that even someone in a district that's a more swing district, when you have that sort of message, people want to know you're going to fight for it. Yeah. And that they have someone who has their back.
All right. Keep fighting a good fight, Congressman.
Thank you, Bill.
It is Saturday, June 30. Got to be there. Families belong together. Familiesbelongtogether.org.
Yep.
Check it out. Great to see you, Congressman.
Rallies around the country. Thank you.
Have a great Wednesday, folks. Look for you tomorrow.
This is the Bill Press Show.